Clarence and I met in 2017.
2017.
In Minneapolis. And he came into a one-on-one session to talk about the company he was building, Upsie. And that journey is amazing. But I want to start even further, like before that. One of the interesting things that I've seen in the journey for entrepreneurs is every entrepreneurial journey is different. Some are easier, some are a little bit more difficult. Talk a little bit about your journey to getting to that room when we met each other at Target.
Yeah, so I come from a very untraditional background. So I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, grew up in the streets of Atlanta, Georgia. So I didn't even know what entrepreneurship meant when I got to that room. Like, I just knew I had an idea that maybe could, save people money and create a decent business. I didn't know all the VC terms. I didn't know, AOV and CAC meant. I was just like, hey, I want to do this thing. And through those early years of my life, so I would say, all the way up to about 25, to be quite honest with you, I was just an asshole. And so I had to figure it out later on in life, and then I met you.
There's way more to the story.
There's way more, but we only
right?
got 20 minutes.
All right, so you did get in trouble a little bit.
I did, a little bit.
On the run, right?
Yes, yep.
Nothing egregious, but enough to kind of put you off the rails for a second.
Yep.
Right? And then you put yourself back on the rails. Talk about like that early step into entrepreneurship, and then a little bit about the company that you ended up building, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I mean, out of the gate was insanely hard. Like I said, I didn't know anything, but I was fortunate in my late 20s to run into the CEO of Best Buy at the time. And, he sat me down one day and he said, hey, you know what? I believe in you. I think there's something special about you. And I remember thinking at the time, I was in full tears. I had a hamburger in my hand, and I was like, here's this man who has access to everything in the world, and he's telling me that I'm special. And it was a moment in time that changed my life. He said, one day you're going to be CEO. One day you're going to have, the kids and the family and all the things that you want. If you trust me and you believe me, I will help you get there. And that was the moment that changed my whole trajectory.
Yeah. So it's, I think, again, going to show of hands in this room, how many of you have come across a helper that's given you that little piece of advice that's kind of moved you on or nudged you in the right direction, right? And it's like something that I try to live every day when I meet people, I talk to them, like just giving them that little bit of encouragement, because I don't think it happens enough. But for you, it actually shaped where you are today. So you get into Techstars. Talk about that experience, because now you're around people who are doing this for a living.
Yeah, so I'm trying to get into Techstars at the time. And there's the year before, there's no Minnesota companies in the Minnesota program because they didn't think any companies were good enough to get in. It kind of sucked. But and so the day that they had our final interview, so I made it to the final, I think like 20 or 17 or something out of 5,000, which felt like a huge accomplishment. But they were like, hey, we need you to do this interview. You got to do it with Target. You got to do it with Techstars. Like, we're all going to be in a room. Well, the same day I had an interview, my wife was supposed to have our son the day before, and it was delayed. So he came the next day. At the same exact time, I had the interview. And so I looked at my wife. It was about 9:30 in the morning, and the doctor was like, the baby's coming soon. And my interview was at 10:30. And I was like, I got a decision to make here. Like, and my wife was like, no, you don't. Like, you're going to stay here. And I just told her, I said, look, like, this is our opportunity. Like, we don't know what will come out of this. And so I emailed Ryan Brochure, who was a managing director at the time, and I said, hey, like, my baby's coming. He's supposed to be here at like 10:30. There's another slot at noon. Can I take that slot? And they were like, no, like, don't come. Like, we're going to judge you fairly. And I said, bullshit, you are. Like, no, you're not. I'm not even going to give you the chance. I'm coming at noon. So our son came at 10:34. We laughed, we cried. And then at noon, the tears dried up. I got in the car, and I drove to Minneapolis. And I walked in, and it was probably 15 people in the room. They stood up and they started clapping. It was like, why are you here? I'm like, because I want to win. And end up doing my pitch. And I found out a year later from Ryan. He said, when you walked out the room, everybody in the room said, you offer him first. Like, if he has to say yes, so you do whatever you need to do to get him in the program. Because any dude that's crazy enough to leave his wife should definitely be in the program.
So I don't advocate that for anyone.
I do not either. My son is 6, and I still hear about that once a month.
So, so I actually know Clarence enough, though, to know that he felt like he needed to do that, right? You
Yes.
needed to do that to stack up against the other companies
Yes.
that were interviewing. So you walk in the doors and the accelerator. You're now benchmarked against some of the best companies, early stage tech companies on the planet. And you're still learning the experience of being an entrepreneur. Talk about the program.
So I knew nothing again. I still haven't learned anything by this time. And I remember the night before the program started, I looked at the list of companies, and I was like, holy crap. Like, there was a lady who already sold a company. There was this dude from New York who had graduated with an MBA at 22, so he was like brilliant. And I was laying next to my wife, and I said, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like, these people are like the best of the best in this. And my wife looked at me, she said, you're gonna do what you always do. You're gonna outwork everybody. So you're gonna be the first one in, you're gonna be the last one out every single day, and let's see what happens. And I remember about a weekend, I went home and I told my wife, I said, like, I'm the best founder in the class. It's not even close. And it's not because I'm smart. It's not because, like, all these things they're teaching us, I can learn these things, but you can't teach hard. And so I just outworked everybody for 13 weeks. And we ended up coming out of that. And we were the first company to raise, we did things that I didn't even know were possible.
So I've sat down with 1,600 Techstars companies one-on-one, and Clarence walked in and immediately left a mark because he was going into a market that is ridiculously hard to navigate. He was essentially building a warranty program to go up against the big boxes while he's going through a program target that is a big box, right? Everything's stacked against you to do that. But his, strength in conviction of being able to succeed was just stuck in my head and kind of started the basis of our relationship. Now, Techstars, an accelerator, you go in it's a cocoon. So you're surrounded by mentors and investors, knowledge share, these people who are going to help and support you out. And eventually you leave that cocoon. And so then you're kind of on your own to connect back in. And we can create a network that supports it, but it's not the same experience. And after program, you found some successes, but you also found some really big challenges. And there's a point in your trajectory, which was a pretty up and to the right trajectory, that you had a little bit of a mental break. And, if I know anything about founders and startups, super lonely experience sometimes, very mentally taxing, right? So in a tree of trust kind of moment, share with the people in the room kind of that breaking point that you had after the program.
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened was, I think one, being a black founder is challenging, right? It's, I remember an investor telling me, Clarence, I can't invest in you because, I've never seen a black founder ever ring the opening bell. I've never seen a black founder have $1 billion acquisition. So, it's hard for me to want to make that bet on you. I really like you. And I remember I got to the point I was sitting in my bedroom and I was probably at the lowest of the low. And I had my daughter was here, so it was me, my wife, and my daughter. And I'm like, I got these responsibilities. And I got a phone call from an investor that said, an investor who was like, hey, we're going to invest. We're in. We're going to do this. And then they called me at the 11th hour the day before it was supposed to close. And said, we're not doing this anymore. And I was devastated. And I remember I kissed my wife, I kissed my kid, and I went and jumped in my car. And I was on 35, so it goes all the way through Minnesota and Iowa. And I remember I was driving, probably 60, 70 miles per hour, and I got off on a thing, and I turned around, and I was driving south. And next thing you know, I was at 90, 100. And in my mind, I was just like, I'm much better not being here. Like, I'm a burden. I'm a burden on my family. So I was at 110, 120, and like something was like, you're gonna be okay, slow down. And I remember there was a bridge coming up, and I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna drive off this bridge, be done. And someone was like, you're gonna be fine. And I remember I slowed down to 50, 60, ended up getting off on the exit and just like sitting there and crying. And like it was a moment in time where I didn't want this startup game to control me anymore. So I was like, I'm gonna be authentic Clarence. I'm gonna be who I am. And if people don't like that, it is what it is.
Yeah. So Clarence and I...
You're making me cry, man.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but... So I go back to we're friends, and we know how to kind of push buttons. I think both ways, and so I appreciate you doing that, because I think that's a lens that a lot of people don't get on how difficult this is. All right, so that moment passes. Upsie starts to really move, and just to give you an idea of how much Upsie moved, Clarence ended up raising $30 million. That's despite some rooms not being open and available to him. So he made the decision to go, as you were kind of skyrocketing, leave Minneapolis and go to Dallas. Talk about that.
I did, yeah. I mean, I thought Minneapolis was great, and I want to be like super transparent here. I grew from a boy to a man in Minneapolis. They gave me a lot of stuff that I still hold on to today. But it was also time to leave. And I think, we've all read the stuff with, George Floyd and everything that's kind of going on in Minnesota. And my wife and I and our family just felt like it was our best opportunity, our best days ahead was going to be starting over fresh somewhere else. So we kept the company there. I moved, and we started hiring remote. That was during, the COVID era. And it was the best decision for us.
So move to Dallas happens. Clarence is on an upward trajectory. The company is going gangbusters, and he decides to fire himself as CEO. Talk about that. And we got like 45 minutes left. 2 minutes. We got 2 minutes.
So yeah, I fired myself, and it was probably one of the best decisions that I made for the company and our investors. I approached one of our investors, who was our biggest investor, True Ventures, who I now work for, and I said, guys, I think for the company to reach its best self, I need to step down, and we need to put in a more professional CEO. And I tell founders all the time, there's no shame, there's no nothing in that. I mean, it was a phenomenal decision for the company, a phenomenal decision for me. I think our investors embraced it.
So he glossed over this, but he ended up at one of the top venture firms in the world. And, if you think about this journey, and I've known Clarence around it for a long time, but to go from not understanding what entrepreneurship or venture is at all to working with one of the leading venture firms in San Francisco, which is what he does now, your journey is not only inspiring, but it's absolutely amazing, and you are a good human being. One of the things that Clarence is trying to do right now is help Black founders understand how to navigate the game. And talk a little bit about that, and we'll do a wrap. But, Alex, Sonia, give us 1 minute to kind of finish this, because I think this is probably the most important part about this talk.
Yeah, I think that there's a huge gap between white founders and Black founders. And I personally don't believe, 77% of VC dollars goes to white males. And I just don't personally believe that a white man is 77 times better than me. I personally don't believe that. When you look at what's happening with women, what's happening with, Black and brown founders, we have a huge step to take forward in this space. And part of my mission, obviously, I get to work at True, I get to work with the best. But part of my personal mission is how do we get more Black founders, more women, understanding like how to raise, like the nuances to raise, and getting them in front of tier 1 VCs so that they can raise. I think it will help the whole community.
So entrepreneurship itself can be really inhumane, right? The process of going through building a company can be a struggle. It can be just brutal. I appreciate you putting a human lens into what that journey is. One of the reasons I think both of us agreed to be at this conference is because this is looking at the human aspect of what notoriously is not human, right? Is very transactional. And to see this emotional piece of it, kudos to everybody putting this on. Thank you for having us here. And Clarence, thank you for sharing your story.
No problem. Thank you.